Imagine you're a dock worker on a normal shift. Another container, another routine inspection, another steel box that looks exactly like the hundreds you've already opened today. You unlock the doors, pull them apart, and before you even see what's inside, the smell hits you. Not oil, not seawater, something heavier, something wrong. Inside, on the cold metal floor, lie 4 human shapes. 3 of them don't move at all. One of them does. One of them blinks. This is the true story of people who were smuggled across the ocean alive, and how only one of them came back. In the early 1990s, global shipping was growing faster than ever before. Every day, enormous cargo ships crossed the oceans carrying tens of thousands of steel containers stacked like giant building blocks. To shipping companies, these boxes were just numbers on a list. To port authorities, they were just cargo that needed to be moved as quickly as possible. But to criminal smuggling networks, these containers were something else entirely. They were a way to move people in complete silence, hidden in plain sight. Somewhere in Eastern Europe, 4 men found themselves trapped by a collapsing economy and a future that seemed to shrink every single day. They were ordinary people, workers, family men, people who had done everything right and still watched their lives fall apart. Factories were closing, jobs were disappearing, money was becoming worthless. Staying meant slowly sinking into poverty with no way out. Leaving was dangerous, but at least it offered hope. When a man approached them with an offer, they listened. He said he could get them to another country across the ocean, a place where there was work, where they could start over, where they could send money back home and rebuild their lives. There would be no passports, no visas, no official records. They would travel as cargo, hidden inside a shipping container. The journey would take weeks, but he promised they would have food, water, and air. He said he had done this before. He said they would survive. The 4 men talked about it for days. They knew how insane it sounded. They knew that if anything went wrong, no one would hear them. No one would come to help. They would simply disappear. But they also knew what waiting at home meant. More debt, more hunger, more watching their families struggle. In the end, desperation made the decision for them. They agreed. Late one night, they were taken to a quiet port. The container they were shown looked no different from any other. Rust along the edges, scratches in the paint, a serial number on the side. Inside, someone had made basic preparations. There were a few plastic water jugs, some canned food, a couple of thin mattresses, and a small battery-powered light. Near the top corner, a few holes had been drilled through the metal for ventilation. It didn't look comforting, but they were told it would be enough. One by one, they climbed inside. They carried only a few personal items and a lot of hope. The last thing they saw of the outside world was the faint glow of pot lights and the shadow of the man who had taken their money. Then the doors closed, the locks snapped shut, and suddenly the world became a metal box. At first, they tried to treat it like a strange adventure. They joked to keep their spirits up. They talked about the jobs they would take when they arrived. They imagined apartments, paychecks, and phone calls home. They carefully rationed their food and water. The constant vibration of the ship's engines became the background sound of their lives, a deep, endless hum that never stopped. Time slowly lost its meaning. They counted days by meals and sleep. The container became unbearably hot during the day and painfully cold at night. The metal walls were always wet with condensation, and their clothes never really dried. The air inside felt thick, but at first, they told themselves it was just nerves. After a while, headaches started, then dizziness. Breathing began to feel harder, like each breath took more effort than the last. They checked the small ventilation holes, but the container was buried deep in a stack of other containers, still surrounded them on all sides. Whatever air was getting in, it wasn't much. Without even realizing it, they started to change their behavior. They talked less. They moved less. They spent more time lying still, trying to save energy. Every movement felt exhausting, like their bodies were running on empty. Then one of them sat down and couldn't stand back up. He said he was just tired. They gave him water. They tried to get him to eat. He smiled weakly and told them he would be fine. A few hours later, he stopped responding. They shook him. They called his name. They pressed their ears to his chest, hoping to hear something, anything. There was nothing. In the middle of the ocean, locked inside a steel box, one of them was dead. Panic spread through the container. They banged on the walls. They shouted until their voices cracked. But the ship kept moving, and the sound of the engine swallowed their cries. Eventually, they were too weak to keep trying. The body stayed where it was, because there was nowhere else to put it. The days that followed felt longer than everything that had come before. The air felt even heavier. The light seemed dimmer. Not long after, a second man started coughing. It was a deep, painful cough that shook his whole body. He said his chest burned and his hands felt numb. He had trouble finishing sentences. His eyes couldn't focus. Then, one day, he stopped talking altogether. He slumped against the wall and died quietly. Now, there were only two. The remaining men understood something terrible. This container was not a way to a better life. It was a trap, a coffin that just hadn't been sealed yet. The promises they had believed in felt distant and meaningless. There was no rescue, no plan, just waiting. The third man lasted a little longer. Maybe his body was stronger. Maybe it was just luck. But he grew weaker with each passing day. His breathing became shallow. His skin turned grey. He slept more and more. And one time, he simply didn't wake up. Now only one man was left. He was alone in the dark with three bodies. The silence felt louder than the engines. He screamed until his throat burned. He cried until he had no tears left. He begged anyone, anywhere, to hear him. No one did. Eventually, he was too weak to even sit up. He lay on the cold metal floor, barely breathing, surrounded by the people who had started this journey with him. He thought about his family. He thought about home. He thought about how a decision that was supposed to save his life had turned into the thing that would end it. He was sure this was how it would happen. Not in an accident. Not in a hospital. Not with anyone holding his hand. But alone in the dark. Forgotten inside a steel box crossing the ocean. So he waited. And he tried not to breathe too fast. The container reached the port after what felt like an eternity at sea. To the crew, it was just another box to unload. Another item on the checklist. They had no idea what was inside. No one suspected anything. But when a dock worker was assigned to open it, the first thing he noticed was the smell. It wasn't the smell of spoiled food or chemicals. It was heavy, metallic, sweet, and oppressive. The kind of smell that makes your stomach turn before you even see anything. He hesitated, then pulled the doors open. Inside, there were three bodies lying motionless, and one man, barely recognizable as human, blinking in the harsh light of the dock. His skin was grey, lips cracked, and eyes sunken deep into his skull. For a moment, the worker thought he was imagining it. Then the man raised a hand, a small, trembling movement. The dock worker shouted for help. Within minutes, the scene was swarming with port security, supervisors, and crew. Someone called an ambulance. Someone slammed the container doors shut as if trying to erase what they had just witnessed. Paramedics arrived quickly, moving the survivor onto a stretcher. His pulse was weak. His breathing was shallow. His eyes darted, trying to focus. But the effort made him look exhausted beyond comprehension. He tried to speak, but no words came. The doors of the container had been opened, but they had only exposed him to the world again after weeks in a metal coffin. Later, investigators pieced together what had likely saved his life. During unloading, the container had been shifted, momentarily separated from the stack, allowing fresh air to reach the small ventilation holes. It was only a tiny, fleeting window, maybe a matter of minutes, but it was enough, just enough to keep one heart beating. The paramedics rushed him to the hospital. Severe dehydration, hypothermia, oxygen deprivation, and organ stress all combined to put his life in jeopardy. Doctors were not sure he would survive the first 24 hours, but he did. And when he was finally able to speak, the story he told was one that sent chills through everyone who heard it. He spoke of the journey, of the promises the smuggler had made, and how they had all seemed like lifelines at first. He spoke of the first man who died quietly on the metal floor, of the second who coughed and weakened over days, and of the third whose body finally gave out. He described the darkness, the heat, the cold, the impossibility of breathing, the mental toll, and the fear of being completely forgotten. The man had survived against odds that no one should have survived. His story triggered an international investigation. Authorities traced the container back to the smuggler, whose operations spanned borders and exploited shipping routes to transport humans as cargo. When confronted, the smuggler claimed it had never been his intention for anyone to die. He claimed the operation had been tested before and that something must have gone wrong. But 3 men were dead, and one would live with the memory of their deaths forever. The survivor's recovery was slow. He had to relearn the strength in his own body. His mind carried the trauma of being trapped in a box with death surrounding him. The simple act of breathing air freely again became a lesson in gratitude. And yet, every time he closed his eyes, he could see the walls, the ventilation holes, and the still bodies. After he was discharged, He tried to return to a semblance of a normal life, but nothing could erase the memory of the container. The ordinary world felt distant, as though it belonged to someone else. Every sound that reminded him of the metal box, the creak of a door, the vibration of a truck, the faint hum of an engine pulled him back to that time in the dark. Investigators found that the shipping company had failed to properly check containers and that port security had no way of detecting such illegal activity at the time. Laws were vague, inspections were minimal, and criminal networks thrived in the gaps between countries. His case became a symbol of the dangers of human trafficking by sea. It reminded the world that the containers stacked on ports and ships could hold more than goods. They could hide lives in peril, lives that were ignored until it was almost too late. The survivor would later say that he sometimes wondered why he alone lived, why his body endured what 3 others could not. He carried guilt for those who didn't make it, a feeling that would never fully leave him. He thought about the family he could call, the children he could see grow, and the life that fate had allowed him to continue. And yet, the memory of that container, the smell, the darkness, the silence remained an indelible scar. Even years later, he could close his eyes and see the faces of the 3 men who didn't survive, hear their faint attempts to speak, feel the heat and the cold pressing against him. Survivor's guilt is heavy, and his was no exception. He knew he had been lucky, but he also knew luck had no morality. It simply decided who would breathe and who wouldn't. Investigators eventually located the smuggler, but his punishment was limited by the laws of the time and the difficulty of proving intent. The survivor testified in court, his voice trembling, describing the horrors of the journey, the hopelessness, and the feeling of suffocation that had almost claimed him. The images he painted were enough to start reform in shipping regulations and to increase awareness of human smuggling operations worldwide. Awareness, though, did little to erase the personal cost. He often thought about how close he had come to death, how easily one small shift of metal or a delay in fresh air could have meant that none of them would have ever been found. He realized that survival is often about timing, luck, and small interventions beyond one's control. His experience forced him to see the fragility of life in a way that few ever do. Everyday actions, like opening a door or drawing a breath, became gifts rather than mundane routines. Yet, for all the suffering he endured, the survivor became a living testimony to endurance. He spoke publicly, warning others of the dangers of illegal smuggling. He urged families to protect each other, communities to watch for signs of human trafficking, and governments to tighten inspections and monitoring of shipping operations. The story of the container, the 3 men who died, and the one who survived became a cautionary tale, shared in reports, documentaries, and news articles. It became a story that haunted anyone who heard it, a reminder of the thin line between life and death. The survivor's voice, when recounting the ordeal, carried the weight of experience and sorrow. He described the moments when hope seemed impossible, when breathing felt like an impossible effort, and when the silence of the container threatened to crush him entirely. Even years later, he could recall the smell, the sound, and the darkness with alarming clarity. Those who heard his story understood the lesson. Survival is never guaranteed, and life can hinge on the smallest chance or the briefest moment of fresh air. Today, containers are everywhere. They carry goods, materials, and sometimes people. Every time one is opened, the world wonders what is inside. Some stories are ordinary, but some are like this one, a testament to human resilience, to desperation, and to the cruel odds that life can impose. The survivor never forgot the faces of the men who died. He honored them in silence, carrying their memory with him as he rebuilt his own life. He knew that nothing would ever fully erase the experience, and yet he was alive, a witness to what most would never understand. When he finally stepped into sunlight after weeks in that container, the world felt different. Every breath, every ray of light, every ordinary sound was magnified. He had survived the impossible, and yet he would never see the sea the same way again. He would never see a port or a container ship without thinking of the 3 men who hadn't made it. He would never forget the suffocating darkness, the heat, the cold, and the silence. He lived because of a fleeting moment, a small shift in the air, a chance that no one had intended to exist. And in surviving, he carried a story that would continue to shock, haunt, and warn anyone who heard it. For the survivor, life became a measure of small miracles. Each breath, each heartbeat, each moment was a reminder of what had been lost and what had been saved. The container remained in the port as evidence, a silent monument to the cruelty of human trafficking and the fragility of survival. People came to know the story, not just as news, but as a lesson, a warning, and a chilling tale of what humans will endure to survive. The survivor's voice continues to echo the horrors he faced, the choices he made, and the men who didn't make it. He reminds the world that desperation can drive ordinary people to extraordinary risks, that luck can be the difference between life and death, and that the human spirit can endure unimaginable suffering. And every time a container is moved, stacked, or opened, there is the lingering question of who is inside, whether they are safe, and what their story might be. The survivor's tale is a testament to endurance, a story that leaves a lasting impression, a story that asks its listeners to remember the value of life, the cruelty of chance, and the unseen horrors that can exist just beyond our awareness. In the end, he survived because fate allowed it, and he lived to tell the story of the men who didn't. 3 lives were lost in a metal box, and 1 was saved by the briefest breath of fresh air, a single chance, and sheer endurance. His story is not just about survival. It is a warning, a lesson, and a haunting memory of what it means to fight for life against impossible odds. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and don't forget to subscribe. See you again in another video.